pressure to do. In other words, Scientology, and say that Scientology, and that you use the ethics conditions all the time, in your career and all these kind of things. But after they, yeah, but then after they've done a couple of them, they even start to believe it. It's very hard. You have to look. I mean, these are decent, good people, and they. It's like. I don't want to say so many alarming things, but I mean, it's. How do people get involved in these destructive relationships just between two people? There's a lot of people that get knocked around and come back, and I doubt the person knocked them around on the first date. And it's it's sad, and just looking at those celebrities, you sell a little piece of your soul when you tell that lie, but you've got it all justified that well, it's good people and it's for the church, and I'm helping the group, and and you got it thing. But I'm telling you, that you're full of it a little bit, and that if you really look at it, it's okay. And like in any other universe, if that came up in session, it would be an overt. But not there, because you're doing it. Because they've got the whole thing, this whole hard sell and all this thing. And what they, do to recruit. Shit, actors is one thing. What about the little children they get into the Sea Organization? Billion-year contracts,
Yeah, what's your reaction to the Sea Org and the way that Sea Org members are treated as opposed to the celebrity clientele? Are you aware of some of the things that happen to Sea Org members?
Well, I've heard things, and they seem quite plausible. I have never seen anybody been abused. I've seen people kind of screamed at. But I've never seen that kind of abuse. To me, it's. Let's say you hear my story, and I got out, and I've got some sad tales, and maybe I got ripped off for a good chunk of money, and this, that, and the other thing. If you look at that as compared to somebody who joins the Sea Org, it's not even comparable. Can you imagine what it would be like to have a person at your beck and call and complete disposal, your slave, who not only was a slave by force, but by you've got them by the mind, not the balls. You got them by the mind. So they're in love with you, devoted to you, to do whatever you want for their entire lifetime. Okay? And you can just get them, so they're working, let's say, just a person working 100 hours probably is what the average Sea Org person works a week. I'd say about 80 to 100 hours a week. What's the minimum wage on that? It's not even minimum wage shit. They build the buildings. They do everything. High-tech stuff. Is it worth at least $75,000 a year? So that's it. And then you get that for 50 years, 40 years, because they get them when they're teenagers. And they've also hired a dentist who takes care of their teeth. They've also hired all these kind of things. It's part of their organization. What is that? That's just millions and millions of dollars worth of free labor. It's not only that, plus your whole life. And what do they get in exchange? They believe that they're saving this sector of the galaxy. And that's enough for them. And they're the few people who have the ethical fortitude to make that kind of a commitment.
What's your reaction to the RPF?
Those are the rules of the game. But to me, what it is more of a way to control. People end up there if they're, I would think, to some degree they feel getting out of control. And so what do? Is you put more control over them until you got them back in control. and whether that's physical abuse or mental abuse or both, it's what it is.
When you're in, did you know the the ins and outs of RPF, where families would be split up and people couldn't communicate for months or even years?
No, they don't talk about that much. I mean, as I got older, I mean, when I was in a little bit longer and spent more time, at the upper organizations like Gold, I would hear about things like that and find out. But they try to keep that stuff away from everybody, especially celebrities, because it indicates, the company line is that the Sea Org is made up of OTs. It's a group of OTs, okay? So for these people to fail, it's meaning that OTs are failing. And it's kind of like a one-shot clear joining the Sea Organization, and you have the EPF, which is the precursor, where you get ready. And that is supposed to, when you're finally posted in the Sea Org, the end phenomenon of the EPF, which is called the Estates Project Force, which is basically where you run around and do a lot of physical labor and take a couple of courses. The end phenomenon of that is supposed to be an OT. And which is interesting to me. I've many times blown my stack when I had to get in touch with somebody at Flag. I had to call the president, and of course they've got a new person answering the telephone at Flag. And of course Scientology touts itself as the cutting edge in communication, whereas they have somebody answering the fucking phone who does not speak English. However, they are an OT. They happen to be an OT from Poland who is now 14 years old and is now the main receptionist for an international fucking hotel. And you call and you say, what the fuck is wrong with this person? Well, they're posted and they should be. It's you got to get that job done. And if their stats are down, I'm sure they're back on the RPF if they hadn't learned to speak English quick enough. And that's not an exaggeration. Insanity.
So you didn't know that much about what's going on in the RPF, things like that?
No, I learned some things online, but...
Yeah. How are you as public kept away from the untheta that's going on in the real world? I mean, if there's, some really negative story about Scientology in the paper or on TV, are you aware of that?
It's a funny thing. Like, I remember, my wife had seen... Ted Koppel interview David Miscavige, and she thought that he kind of fucked up, certainly wasn't very OT, and she talked to Susan Watson, who was the president of CC, said, that, and CC, and Susan was like, it's almost like gaslighting somebody, that expression? Yeah, which is, kind of make him seem like are you crazy? Oh, well, he was just doing a tone scale drill because, Ted Koppel. And, just kind of to just not is the thing. I think it's called dead agenting. And it was an interesting thing. I mean, I had a similar experience. Well, just seeing Tom Cruise, acting a little bit in a way that, could distress a lot of people. And they make it into well, this is the greatest. Yeah, no, this is good. People just can't handle his level of enthusiasm, And it's a little, okay. So that's the company line, and you go, okay,
Even now, when with the release of the Tom Cruise tape and global attention to this, they're trying to spin it as a positive that all these people are coming to our site and learning about Scientology and joining.
Right.
Whereas the rest of the world is thinking, Tom Cruise is nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though. In their own little world, it makes sense. The funny thing is that is a Scientologist talking to Scientologists. I mean, that's Tom Cruise who's sitting there. I've done these kind of videos, being interviewed, knowing that his